It is interesting to learn that between 1900 and 2000, that is 100 years, 65% of Nobel Prize winners have been believers in God. So instead of asking questions about science versus religion, the real question that faces us is this: which way does science point, if any? Does science support atheism, as Richard Dawkins and many others claim? Or does science support theism? Or is it completely neutral? Modern science exploded in Europe in the 16th and 17th centuries under people like Galileo, Kepler, Newton, Pascal, Boyle, Faraday, Babbage, and so on. All of the people I've mentioned, and many more, were Christians. They were theists. They believed in God. And they were the pioneers of contemporary science. Now, historians and philosophers of science have been very interested in this, and they've asked the question, is there a connection between belief in God and the rise of science? And the general conclusion is, yes, there is a very deep connection. And C.S. Lewis probably put it best when he said men became scientific because they expected law in nature, and they expected law in nature because they believed on a lawgiver. Because far from belief in God hindering scientific research, the argument goes the other way. Belief in God was the motor that drove scientific research. People believed in a rational intelligence behind natural phenomena. And so they believed science could be done. It's interesting that because it shows us that all scientists have faith, not necessarily in God, but they all have faith that science can be done. I say that because there's a very widespread impression that faith is a religious concept. It is not merely a religious concept. It's a normal word, faith, coming from Latin fides, which means trust, belief. All scientists are believers, as Albert Einstein once wrote. I cannot imagine a scientist without that faith. I am not in the least ashamed to be a Christian and a scientist, for the very simple reason that Christianity gave me my subject. So historically, there is a very strong connection between Christianity and the rise of science. But now comes the odd thing. You get people like Richard Dawkins writing books like The God Delusion and persuading many people that there is no need to consider the question of God because God is a fictitious Freudian figure with no real existence. I was debating a physicist in the Netherlands, and he said, your belief in God is like belief in Santa Claus. And I said, well, we should test that with the audience. So I asked everyone in the audience to put up their hand if they came to believe in Santa Claus as an adult. And there were nearly 2,000 people there, and there was not one hand went up. And then I said, how many of you came to believe in God as an adult? And hundreds of hands went up. And I turned to this physicist and I said, this is an absurdly childish argument. To put God in the same category as Santa Claus is foolish intellectually, because some of the best brains of history has spent years thinking about the nature of God and writing about the nature of God. There is no such literature about Santa Claus. And that came out in rather an amusing way when Stephen Hawking, the world's most famous living scientist, was asked what he thought of religion. And he said, religion is a fairy story for people afraid of the dark. And I was asked to comment on this profound statement. And I asked the newspaper, I think it was the Times, did they want one-line answer? Oh, they said, please, we want a one-line answer. So I'm afraid I was rather cheeky, and I suggested, okay then, atheism is a fairy story for people afraid of the light. Isaac Newton is a very good person to think about because he discovered the law of gravitation, and he put it into his book Principia Mathematica. And for him, it was a wonderful reason to believe in God. When he discovered his mathematical description of the universe, he did not say, I have a scientific explanation, therefore I do not need God. No. He said, what a marvelous God to do it that way. And the more he understood of the universe, the more he admired the God that had done it that way.